The evening sun descended behind rolling scrubland, painting the wilderness in shades of burnished gold. A harsh wind swept through mesquite thickets like whispered secrets. Horses whinnied and stamped their hooves on the hardened ground as 5 riders dismounted in the grove, their spurs jingling against dry leaves and ice crystals. They hauled her forward without ceremony, limp, voiceless, and wounded. She appeared barely grown, wrists secured with rawhide strips, her hair matted with grime and blood. Her garment was shredded at the shoulders, revealing flesh scraped raw from violence. The youngest among them, his chin still smooth with youth, averted his gaze as they bound her standing against an ancient cottonwood's trunk. "Sufficient," he mumbled, uncertainty threading his words. The commander, bearing a crooked mark along his jaw and eyes like frozen steel, advanced. From his belt he drew a blade, its surface catching the fading crimson light. "Not finished," he declared without emotion. He pressed the steel to her flesh. She remained silent, even as the metal bit deep. When he withdrew, perspiration beaded his forehead. Inscription across her shoulders wept crimson. "Savage's woman," another rider laughed, harshly and expectorated. "That'll warn him proper." "Warn who?" questioned the youth. "She won't survive until dawn breaks." The leader mounted his steed. "Whoever discovers her." Anyone considering bedding down with heathens? He spurred his horse toward the forest. "Our work here is complete." The group departed without backward glances, hooves thundering into the darkness. But someone observed from concealment, hidden among dense undergrowth several hundred yards distant. Marcus Stone crouched behind limestone and cedar cover. The breeze carried the stench of violence and worn leather to his hiding spot, his rifle resting across his knees. He remained motionless as the attackers vanished into shadow. Even after the forest fell completely still, only when the echo of departing horses had long faded did he rise. His boots made no sound on the frozen earth. Marcus had dwelled alone in these highlands for seasons uncounted, long enough that wildlife avoided his scent entirely. A former tracker turned hermit. He had mastered reading wind patterns, shadows, and human cruelty. This cruelty was etched in scarlet lines across a vulnerable skin. He approached the tree with measured caution. The young woman hung forward, her breathing shallow but present. Her lips were split, cheeks gaunt, dirt and blood masking her lashes. Her head shifted slightly. Marcus said nothing initially. He stood before her in silence, his silhouette tall and motionless against the golden-barked trees. His hand twitched once near his side, not for a weapon, but from instinct. Finally, his voice cut the stillness, low and careful. "Can you understand me?" No response came. He stepped closer. The letters on her back glistened wet in the fire-colored twilight. Whoever had carved them understood prolonging agony. Marcus's jaw tightened. He tried again. "Miss, are you conscious?" This time her body jerked slightly. Barely perceptible, but enough. Then her lips moved dry, nearly inaudible. "Please?" "No." Her head lolled as her knees buckled beneath the bindings. Marcus observed her. Not with pity, not yet. Pity held no place in the territories he'd traveled, but something deeper stirred. Something beneath grief and isolation. Something that smelled like remembrance. His gaze lingered on the knife wounds. Each cut held purpose. This wasn't punishment. It was a message. He stepped back, breathing slowly. Savage's woman. He'd heard that phrase spat like venom across the frontier. It mattered not whether it had been love, force, or mere survival. To most, no distinction existed. A woman like her would not be rescued. She would be abandoned, condemned, forgotten. Marcus turned his head and listened. Nothing but wind currents. He looked back at her, still breathing, still bleeding, still here. But for how much longer? His grip tightened slowly around his rifle. Stock, and for the first time in many years, Marcus Stone did not walk away. Darkness had consumed the sky entirely when Marcus stepped nearer. The young woman barely remained upright, supported only by rope tension. Her chin drooped to her chest, a strand of hair plastered across her cheek like shadow. Marcus knelt beside her, breath visible in the cold air. He reached for the blade. On his belt an old cavalry knife, its handle worn smooth from years of use. He paused momentarily before drawing it, his eyes drifting to the faded inscription at the base. A name, not his own. He had ceased using names long ago. The rawhide strips had bitten deep into her wrists. He saw dried blood, bruises blooming like ink beneath pale skin. Slowly, he slid the knife between flesh and rope. She flinched. Steady. He murmured, "I'll work quickly." The bonds fell away, and with them her remaining strength. She collapsed forward, but he caught her not completely. Just enough to guide her down gently, his arms forming a careful cradle. Her breath hitched, warm and moist against his neck. That was when he saw the word clearly for the first time. Savage's woman, carved without hesitation, each letter jagged, uneven, angry. He stared at it, breath shallow, his hand still holding the knife. For a moment, he couldn't move. The blood wasn't just hers anymore. It was his past bleeding too. Years of warfare, of hatred, of stories told around campfires about women who betrayed their kind. He had believed those stories once. He had repeated them, and now the evidence was carved in flesh. A woman left to die because she had loved where others had feared. He shook his head, tucked the knife away, and pulled her closer to his chest. She didn't resist. The journey back to his cabin was lengthy. He carried her wrapped in his old cloak, careful not to jostle her more than necessary. She weighed less than she should have. Hunger clung to her bones. The path wound through brittle pines and brush, up a ridge worn down by storms and time. No one followed. No one would. When they reached the cabin, the moon was a dull disk behind clouds. Inside, the air was dry and faintly herbal. Juniper branches hung from rafters, and jars of dried roots lined shelves. The fire had long since died, but embers still glowed faintly in the stove. He laid her on the cot in the corner, beneath a wool blanket. Then he lit the oil lamp, adjusted the wick low, and knelt beside her once more. Her face was pale, lips cracked, fever creeping at the edges of her skin. Her hands trembled even in sleep. He fetched clean cloths and a tin of boiled salve. His fingers, though calloused, moved with deliberate care as he cleaned the blood from her back. She winced, even unconscious. He worked in silence. Only once. Did he speak more to the shadows than to her? "They should have left you be," he whispered. The hours passed. Outside, coyotes howled at something distant. A breeze rattled the shutters. But inside the world held still. Marca sat by the far wall on the old bench he had carved himself years ago when he still believed in permanence. He watched the woman, watched her breathe, shift, murmur in sleep. His eyes drifted again to the bandage across her back. The word beneath it would not disappear, not easily. But maybe, just maybe, it could fade. He did not sleep that night. And when the lamp flickered low, his silhouette was still there, silent. Upright, watching over the woman fate had bound to a tree. She had been Catherine Wade once. Kate, to those who knew her, best daughter of Thomas Wade, owner of the largest cattle operation west of the Brazos. A girl with wheat-colored hair and boots too large for her feet, who could ride bareback before she could write her letters. She had been someone until the attack. It came without warning, just a scream from the pastures, the crack of rifles, and the smell of burning hay. Kate had run toward the barn, toward her father's voice, and then everything blurred. When she awoke, she was not in her room nor in her town. She was in the heart of Apache country. At first, there was only terror. She expected pain, punishment. She had heard the stories everyone had about what happened to white women taken in raids, what they became, but the pain didn't come. Instead, there was a young man, no older than herself. His name was Kia. He brought her water, bread, a fur-lined blanket. He didn't speak her language well, but he listened when she wept. He didn't touch her, not once. Days passed, then weeks. Her bruises faded, her terror didn't. But Kia was always there, quiet like a stone warmed by sunlight. He taught her small words: bird, fire, sky. She told him others. Thank you, please, Kate. One night, when the moon hung low and golden over the plains, he showed her the scar on his chest, faint, shaped like an arrowhead. Soldier, he said, pointing. Then he touched her heart. Not soldier. She didn't understand then, but she nodded. And when he kissed her, she didn't pull away. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was gentle, forbidden. Human love is fragile as it was fleeting. They had for weeks before the cavalry came. 4 weeks before boots stomped the earth again, and rifles cracked through dawn. She had been found in an Apache lodge, wrapped in an Apache blanket, clutching the shirt of a young man with an arrowhead scar. They didn't ask questions. They just pulled her from the dirt. She screamed his name. He didn't answer. Back in town, she wasn't welcomed. She was watched. The minister's wife refused her bread. Her childhood friend turned away in the street. Whispers followed her like smoke. They said she had lain with a savage. They said the child growing in her belly was enemy blood, even though no physician had confirmed it, even though she said nothing. She had barely been home 2 nights before they came. 4 men, faces hidden in kerchiefs, hands rough as rope. They dragged her from her bed, tied her hands, took her to the woods. When they pressed her against the tree, she spat in their faces. When they carved the words, she bit her lips so hard they split. They wanted her to scream. She didn't. Not once. Now in the cabin far from all of it, she dreamed of firelight and wind, of a young man with quiet eyes and warm hands, of a name whispered in darkness. And she woke to fever and a back that burned. Her hands moved to her stomach still. Flat, still uncertain. But in her mind she knew she had loved, and for that they had tried to erase her. She woke to pain. Not the raw screaming kind, but the deep crawling ache of skin split open and souls stretched too thin. Her body throbbed with fever, her mouth dry as bone, and her vision swam in hues of orange and shadow. Something creaked softly nearby. The scent of pine sap and old smoke clung to the air. There was a fire, a roof above her, logs stacked by the hearth, a blanket that scratched faintly against her arms. And footsteps, slow, pacing across the wood floor. She jerked upright. The world tilted. Pain exploded down her spine. She bit back a cry and blinked hard, trying to make sense of the room. Cabin walls. A rifle leaning against a shelf. A man standing over a kettle, coat slung over a nearby chair. Her breath seized. She had been taken. Another man, another captor. Another shadow standing between her and freedom. Her lungs caught fire.
Ow.
Her hands flailed for something, anything, and landed on a splintered piece of wood lying near the hearth. A chair leg, a weapon. She moved before her mind could warn her otherwise. The man turned just in time to catch the blow across his shoulder. The wood cracked with a dull, splitting thud. He stumbled 1 step back, a sharp grunt escaping his chest. But he didn't shout, didn't strike back, didn't raise his hand. He looked at her, steady and breathless, palm lifted in surrender. I'm not here to harm you. His voice was rough gravel rolled through ash, but quiet. No demand, no threat. Kate stood shaking, the makeshift club still in her grip. Her breath came in harsh pulls. No one ever is, she rasped, her voice cracked. And broken, he didn't deny it, didn't try to reason. Instead, he lowered his hand, nodded once like he had expected this, like he deserved it. I have taken lives, he said. She flinched. The words landed like a drop of cold water down her spine. His gaze held hers. Not with pride, not with shame, just truth. I killed because I believed in something, he continued. Then I kept killing. Because I didn't believe in anything at all. He let the words settle heavy in the air. But I didn't bring you here to kill you or to touch you or to judge you. Kate's grip loosened. The wood trembled in her fingers, her strength bleeding out. With the fire behind her ribs, then why? She whispered. He turned back to the kettle. The steam had begun to hiss. He poured the water into a battered tin cup, crushed something dark and nodded into the brew, then placed the cup gently on the table near her. For the fever, he said, he didn't reach for her. He didn't come closer. Instead, he crossed the room and sat on a low stool beside the wall. He took up a needle and thread and, without speaking, began to mend a torn corner of the blanket that had covered her. As he worked, Kate let her guard drop. She watched him. His fingers were thick, weathered, but moved with care. He stitched slowly, methodically, not rushed, not angry. When he finished, he folded the blanket and placed it on the edge of the cot, still leaving space between them. Still no words, still no force. She let the wood drop from her hand. Knees gave way. She lowered herself to the floor near the fire, bone-weary, her body still thrumming with pain, but no longer fear. Not quite. She picked up the cup. It was warm against her palms. The taste was sharp ginger and smoke. She sipped carefully. The silence held. Then, her voice small. "You know my name?" He looked at her, slow and certain. "Kate," he said. "That, not Savage's woman, not horror, just Kate?" Her throat clenched. She turned her face to the fire, eyes burning with something she couldn't name, said nothing more. The storm outside had passed, but the wind still whispered through the cracks in the cabin walls. Marcus had fallen asleep with his back against the door, arms crossed, boots still laced. The rifle lay nearby, within reach, but untouched. Kate sat by the fire, the blanket wrapped tight around her. The tea had helped. The fever had broken. Her hands no longer trembled. Only the weight in her chest remained. The silence between them had stretched for hours, safe, but not quite warm. Then she spoke. Her voice was hoarse, as if unused for too long. Her name was Kia. Marcus stirred but didn't look up. He was younger than me, maybe 19, barely a man, but he moved like the wind, quiet, gentle. She stared into the flames, their light dancing in her eyes. "I thought they would kill me when I was taken, or worse. But he found me, sheltered me, shared what little he had, spoke to me in broken English, and when I cried, he said nothing, just listened." Marcus listened now. Kate drew in a sharp breath. "I asked him once why he helped me. He said, because you are not a thing. You are someone's star." Her voice cracked. "We shared 4 nights. That was all. We didn't speak of forever, only of now." Log popped in the fire. "He was shot," she whispered, "by one of the scouts during the raid. I never saw him fall, but I felt it like something inside me died before I even knew why." She drew the blanket tighter. "When they brought me back, I thought they would ask. I thought someone might wonder if I was all right." But the questions, they were knives. Marcus turned slightly, enough to meet her gaze. "I was pregnant," Kate said, and her eyes didn't waver. "Barely 2 months. They didn't know. But the woman who tended me, she suspected. She told the others. Then the whispers came. Then the hatred." She swallowed hard. "I lost the baby the second night in Jalel on the floor, bleeding." Marcus said nothing, because what could he say? Kate's shoulders trembled, but she didn't cry. "I would have named him Samuel, or maybe David. Something strong." Marcus stared into the fire. His voice, when it came, was like sand through an old sieve. "My wife's name was Rebecca." Kate looked over, startled. She liked apple tarts, couldn't sing to save her life, but she hummed so sweetly it made horses calm down. A faint smile touched his lips, but it didn't stay. "My boy William 4 years old, thought rabbits were baby deer." Kate leaned forward, drawn by the fragility in his tone. "They were killed?" He nodded. "Apache raided. Middle of the night. I was out hunting, not even 2 miles away. I heard the screaming, ran like hell." His jaw clenched. "I buried them with my own hands." Silence fell. He rubbed his eyes as if wiping away ghosts. "After that, I enlisted again. Not with the army, with the ones who wore badges, but no mercy. I tracked, I burned, I shot. We didn't ask names, didn't check if they fought, just rode into camps like fire and left ashes behind." Kate watched him, told myself I was doing right justice, retribution. He shook his head. "But I wasn't. I was making sure someone else hurt like I did." He looked at her then, fully. "And I swore if I ever came across someone who had lain with them with the enemy, I'd treat them like traitors. His eyes dropped to the floor. It's like you, the fire crackled. But I didn't, he added, almost to himself. Kate's eyes filled with something unreadable. Not forgiveness, not fear, but knowing. They sat that way a long while to scarred lives, stitched loosely together by silence and truth. And in that silence, something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the first fragile thread of it. The sky was slate gray when they reached the clearing. Clouds hung low like old grief, and the wind stirred the grass in slow, mournful waves. Cottonwood stood unchanged, its bark still rough. Its roots coiled deep into the earth like old secrets, refusing to die. Marcus dismounted first, then offered a hand. Kate hesitated, then took it. Her steps were slow, but steady. Her back had closed, but the memory still pulsed just beneath the skin. They stood in silence. The rope marks were still faintly visible on the bark. She couldn't look at them. Marcus did. He pulled a bundle from his saddlebag, a long cloth wrapped around something weighty and familiar. He knelt by the base of the tree and unwrapped it. The knife glinted dull in the morning light. Kate recognized it instantly, not just from memory, but from feeling, from the ghost of steel slicing skin. Marcus held it in both hands. "This blade's been with me a long time," he said quietly. "It kept me alive, fed me, fought for me." His voice tightened. "It also did this." He nodded toward the tree, toward her. Kate didn't move. "I wasn't there when they marked you," he said. "But that doesn't change what I carry." He turned the blade in his hand as if weighing it, then looked at her. "I used this knife to carve messages into the world, messages I thought were justice." He swallowed hard. "But I see now they were just echoes of pain passed from one hand to another." She stepped closer, watching him. He began to dig. Not deep. Just enough. The earth was cold, resistant, but he didn't stop. His fingers bled before the knife did. When the hole was ready, he paused, held the knife once more. "I don't bury this because I regret all I've done," he said. His hands trembled. "I bury it because I don't want to add another name to what it remembers." He placed the blade into the earth, covered it slowly, pressing dirt with bare palms. Each handful seemed to pull something from his chestnut weight, but history. When it was done, he sat back on his heels. The wind was silent. Kate stood still, her face unreadable. Then she knelt beside him. He said nothing. She placed her hand over the dirt, over the grave of a weapon, of a past. Marcus didn't look at her, but he whispered, "I will not lift another blade, unless it is to protect, not punish." Kate's voice came soft but sure. "Then let it stay buried." He turned, and for the first time saw no fear in her eyes only. Truth, and maybe, just maybe, forgiveness. The morning air hung heavy with tension. Boots crunched against frost-hardened trail. Dust rose in dull puffs beneath hooves and heels. 12 riders came through the trees, faces grim, rifles slung across shoulders. Men from the settlement, dusters flapping in the wind like worn-out. Justice. They looked like they had come to collect a debt. Marcus heard them before he saw them. It's the low creak of saddles, the clink of metal against leather, the way men tried to breathe like they weren't afraid. He stepped outside the cabin without his coat, bare arms crossed over his chest, breath misting in the cold. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes. But he didn't blink as they approached. Their leader a sheriff with a tarnished badge and gilt. Behind his eyes reigned in first. His mouth was tight around the edges. "We're here for her," he said. Marcus didn't move. "You're late. She's accused," the sheriff said, "of consorting, of treason." "She was left to die," Marcus replied. "Is that justice now?" Murmurs stirred behind the sheriff, the kind of murmurs men made when they weren't sure if they were on the right side of the noose. From the doorway, Kate stepped into view. She wore a plain shawl, her hair braided back, neat and stubborn. Her face pale, but firm. The wind tugged at her skirt, but her spine stayed straight. Even in the bruised morning light, she looked like someone who had survived a fire and learned to walk through smoke. The sheriff narrowed. "Ma'am, if you come quietly, we won't harm you." Kate didn't speak. Marcus did. "She has nothing to confess but love," he said. "And if that's a crime, then I'm guilty too." The men stiffened. The sheriff turned sharply toward him. "You," Marcus nodded once. "She's not just the savage's lover now. She's mine." A hush rippled through the riders. Then one of them, older, gray-bearded, leaned forward in his saddle. "Is that Stone?" he asked, squinting. Marcus didn't answer, but the name passed through the line like wind through grass. Marcus, Stone Scout, survivor, the ghost of Apache wars, a man whose legend had grown sharper than the knife he carried, a man who had spilled more blood than most men had ever seen. "You killed 30 of them outside Canyon Creek," one whispered. "Lost a family doing it," another added, quieter. The sheriff's jaw twitched. Marcus stepped forward just one step, enough to cut through memory. His voice was low and without pride. "I spent years hunting ghosts in other people's skin. I thought killing them would make me clean. It didn't." He looked at Kate. "She taught me what mercy looks like, what it costs." Kate moved beside him. Hands slid into his, not hidden, not hesitant. Her fingers laced with his like they'd always known how. Her voice was clear. "I never betrayed this land. I survived what it became. I bled where no one watched, and I loved not as a traitor, but as someone who still could." The scar on her back stung with cold, but she stood unshaken. She had nothing more to prove, only herself left to be. The men didn't raise their guns. They looked at each other, some ashamed, some unsure, all caught in the space between what they'd been told and what they now saw. And then, one by one, they began to turn not with defiance, but with the heavy gait of men who knew they'd judged too fast and too cruel. The sheriff lingered last. His eyes met Marcus's. They held something complicated. "No anger, maybe, or understanding. You willing to fight for her?" he asked. Marcus's answer came quiet and steady. "I'm willing to live for her." "That's harder." The sheriff's jaw moved once, then he tipped his hat and followed the others into the trees. The silence afterward was louder than the confrontation. Kate leaned into Marcus's, sighed. Neither of them spoke for a long while, but they both knew one had one. And yet, for the first time in a long time, no one had lost. The wind that once howled through broken branches now carried the scent of blooming sage and wild lupin.
Out.
The clearing where blood once soaked the roots of an old cottonwood had changed. Beneath that tree, where the knife had been buried 2 years before, a patch of small purple flowers now grew wild, steady, as if fed by something deeper than rain. Marcus Stone wiped the back of his neck as he straightened from the garden bed. The land had become softer under their hands. Furrows now ran where bullet tracks once did. Kate knelt nearby, her rounded belly pressing against the faded apron as she tucked sprigs of mint into the soil. She looked up and met his eyes with a smile that made the world feel wide and whole again. They were married just days after the first. Bloom had sprouted under the cottonwood tree. No church, no preacher, only the sky, the grass, and a few neighbors, who had found their healing in the quiet couple in the hills. Kate wore a dress, dyed with berry, juiced, and stitched by her own hand. Marcus wore a shirt she had mended for him. The patch across the left shoulder, still faintly visible, a scar over cloth. Much like the one on her back, they stood under a sweep of sky as the wind curled through tall grass. He took her hands with steady fingers and said, "You don't owe me your life, and I never asked for your pain. But if you choose me not for debt, but for love, then I will spend what days I have growing old beside you." Her voice didn't shake when she answered. "Choose you. Not because of what you saved me from, but because with you I was never a secret, never ashamed, just me." There was no applause, only wind. Spring passed, then summer. The day her water broke, thunder rolled over the plains. Rain poured onto the roof of the old cabin as Marcus lit every lamp they owned, boiled water, and spread fresh cloth, just as she had taught him. He moved like a man walking a tightrope with care, terror, and the raw weight of love. Kate screamed once, then gritted. Her teeth, her hand clutched his wrist like iron. "Promise me," she gasped. "This child will never bleed for someone else's war." He pressed his forehead to hers, voice breaking. "I buried the knife," he whispered. "Now we plant seeds." And when the child's cry rose into the storm, it wasn't just birth, it was resurrection. They named him Samuel, not for any profit, but for the story of being heard when you call out. 2 years later, the boy ran barefoot across the field, chasing butterflies and laughter, calling out, "Papa! Mama!" His voice carried through the trees, the tall grass, the sky. Marcus mended the fence. Kate stirred herbs for salve. They looked at each other, and the only language they spoke was peace. They never told Samuel about the words cut into her back. They never spoke of Apache raids or militias or trials where love was weighed like gold. They taught him to plant, to mend, to hold gently. And when a stranger from the east rode past one afternoon, sharpcoat, clean boots, pale suspicion, he slowed his horse and asked the question like an accusation. "You're the woman who married a killer." Kate looked down at her son, who clutched a handful of wildflowers and knew nothing of knives or shame. "I'm the woman he chose to live beside," she said, her voice calm. "This boy's the only thing we've both sworn never to lose." She smiled. But it wasn't just joy. It was the quiet pride of someone who had bled for every inch of peace and would bleed again to protect it. The rider said nothing more. He tipped his hat and rode on. That night, as dusk fell over the land, Marcus knelt beneath the cottonwood tree and ran his hand through the soft earth where flowers bloomed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Kate stepped beside him, and he rapped. One arm around her waist, the other around their child. No songs, no monuments. Just the sound of wind and the knowledge that somewhere long ago a knife had been buried. And now in its place, something had bloomed. Epilogues, some wounds carved deeper than flesh. Some names are meant not to shame, but to remind us how love survives where it is most unwelcome. Kate and Marcus didn't find peace in a courthouse or in vengeance. They found it in the soil, in the silence, in the hands that once hurt, now choosing to heal. And maybe that's the real story of the frontier, not just the guns, not just the scars, but what you plant after you bury the knife.